All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here on 2024 preview and prediction for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Looking at this coaching staff, Marcus Freeman back through his third year, 19-7 record this far. Second stint for offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock, coming off a Heisman-winning season with Jaden Daniels at LSU, returns back to the Irish. Al Golden, 30 on staff as the defensive coordinator. Irish, managed a difficult schedule, lost all 3 games last year to ranked opponents, pulled in a top 10 class. Freeman's doing a great job in that regard. Look at the offense. Even though they put up 32 points per game and, on paper had some pretty good balance. And the losses, Nick, the offense just team just stag. I thought Sam Hartman was good, but a lot of people expected him to be in the Heisman race. So, he had about 2,700 yards, 8 interceptions, 24 passing touchdowns, that is. Now you're going to replace him with Riley Leonard, a guy who has good acceleration and speed as a runner, breakaway player, has good vision, good movements in the pocket, and showcased some really good touch. Did good work as a deep ball thrower at times. Was banged up all year long for Duke a season ago, which is really just tough because this is a guy that really could have led them to big things in the conference. But once he got hurt, Duke's season really got derailed. So last year probably isn't the greatest example of what he can accomplish, especially on the stat sheet, Nick. But when he was healthy and he was playing, they really struggled to throw the ball. And obviously they don't have the athletes over at Duke that they here have in South Bend, but completed 51% against Clemson, 44% against FSU before he exited. The next week he was beat up again, 40%, and then he also played the Irish himself, a game he ended up getting injured in on the final play, another 45% completion rating showing. Are you concerned about Riley Leonard coming over here to Notre Dame? Because I think this is a good scheme fit for him and Denbrock, who has been very successful with similar style players, dual threat players at that. What's the expectation for Leonard here? Because I think he'll be a little bit of in between. Good at times, but also struggle at times in the jump and comp.
I think this is certainly something where you can look at it where it is somebody that could be a 50-50 thing about whether or not he's going to perform phenomenally or struggle. I think he's a really solid quarterback that comes over against from Duke to the Irish here. He struggled against the Irish and got hurt in that game last year, and ended up having his season end. The stats as the season was going on were not great last year at that 57% comp rate, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks, and then 4 rushing touchdowns prior to his injury, but his 2022 was phenomenal. You're right, 63% comp rate, 2,900 yards passing, 20 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, as well as 700 yards on the ground, 5.6 yards per carry, and 13 touchdowns. So certainly impressive numbers there. He can really run the ball. He's a really strong quarterback as well. I like the frame, 6'4", 216, a veteran quarterback from Fairhope, Alabama at this moment in time, who's played 3 seasons at Duke and now kind of transfers over here. Yes, the jump up in competition is certainly there, but the ACC, they played some tough teams last year. At Duke, he beat Clemson on week 1 in a game where he performed pretty well, in my opinion, in that one. And the scheme should really help him. I am concerned about his O-line losses that we're going to talk about a little bit later on this offensive part of this episode here. When you look at this offense, they scored a lot of points last year. I think they'll score a lot of points again this year. But losing his top running back, some O-line pieces, I do worry that this offense is going to see a dip production.
We'll go ahead and allude to Audric Estime's departure. A guy who was phenomenal last year, over 1,300 yards, 18 rushing touchdowns, just the ultimate bruiser. They still have a very good backfield here, though, led by Jeremiah Love. Really impressed as an athlete with versatility, home run threat with some good toughness between the tackles, has pass-catching upside as well. Jadarian Price, more of a one-cut runner, but has plenty of speed and is a filled-out 206-pound back, shines most on zone and counter runs. Brian Payne tore his ACL, which is a stinger to its depth, meaning 2 true freshmen will be up next in Kenron Young, who was a great add at around 220 pounds. Figures to be maybe a short yardage goal line back this year with good balance and vision. Anais Williams could be a third down back as well. Pretty impressive running back room for the Irish, but obviously trying to make up for that much missing production is going to be tough, Nick, but I think these guys last year, Love and Price, as freshmen, showed they're able to do so.
Love and Price are 2 solid backs that have to replace a lot of production from Estimine, which I think is certainly possible, but I do get a little concerned about the dip in quality on this rushing attack. Love had 385 yards rushing, 5.4 yards per carry, and 1 score. Also had 8 receptions, including a touchdown last year, while Price had 272 yards on the ground, 5.8 yards per carry, and 3 scores last year, as well as a touchdown reception. So both of them were involved in the passing game a little bit. And then Pine got hurt, which is definitely a big loss for this team, but they add some strong pieces further down the depth chart. So I do think this is an offense that will be able to run the ball. I just wonder how much of a successful click they'll be able to run the ball out compared to last year. They were 28th in the nation last year, about 185 yards per game. I don't know if they're going to be a top 30 unit again this year. I think they're going to struggle to get to that. They should be a top 50 unit, but what will that relate to and how many points per game they score?
You look at the wide receiver group, one that I think is also incredibly underrated. Jaden Thomas has He had some great games early on in the year, but health really plagued the rest of the season for him. A good X at 6'2", 221. Jaden Greathouse had a team-high 5 TDs, but were scattered throughout the season. Started off strong in the slot, but injuries forced him out wide, where he ended up, with his own hurt hamstring. They added Chris Mitchell from FIU is a great one. Of his speed and route running, pretty good strength for only being 6'1", 181 as well. Jordan Fajon was good in the slot. Got better each week during the back half of the season, ending up with some pretty stout production. The Adebo Collins, who never really did much for Clemson. And then, Jaden Harrison had 400-plus yards at Marshall last season. They also have a good tight end in Mitchell Evans. He's a pretty good player at his respective position with hands and blocking upside. And then a guy in Micah Gilbert, who's a true freshman, 6'2", 204 pounds. Might see the field early on in the season. Again, I think this is a pretty good pass-catching room here, Nick. I think it's probably one of the best they've had in maybe recent memory, because they do have, a nice variety of young guys and, a few veterans I think you can count on as well. What do you make of this receiving core that doesn't need to be incredible for the Irish, but in terms of providing balance, they should be able to do that with ease?
Some solid pieces here. Mitchell Evans played in 8 games at tight end last year, 422 yards receiving, 14.6 yards per grab, and 1 score for him. Solid numbers there. Jordan Faison, 322 yards receiving, 16.9 yards per grab, and 4 scores. Solid red zone target there. 7 games last year only for him, so nice production through those games. Jaden Thomas, 310 yards receiving, 14.8 yards per grab, and 2 scores. Jaden Greathouse, 18 receptions for him, and 5 of those were touchdowns, 265 yards receiving, 14.7 yards per grab. Bo Collins, can he finally find a way to develop? He had not really looked great at all down there at Clemson. Micah Gilbert, true freshman there, that could be really solid for this team. And then Chris Mitchell, I think, is a really solid add out of the portal as well. I do like what this wide receiver room has.
Now you look at the offensive line, like you alluded to, they lose key opponents, including both NFL starting offensive tackles. They're starters for this team. That is Joe Alt and then Blake Fisher. Charles Jaguza, a top 50 recruit in last year's class, started in the bowl game. He'll now become the full-time left tackle. Real strong physical player. Pat Coogan was a good starter at left guard. He's going to return. Billy Schlurf played a good bit during the season, but was the starter at right guard for the final 3 games. It was pretty admirable. He's in a battle with Rocco Spindler, who's good in his near 600 snaps, will need to be better to take that next step. Zeke Corral, last year's starter at center, ends up transferring out, opening the door for Ashton Craig, who enters his 3rd year in the program. You have Tosh Baker at 6'8", 321, likely to be the starting right tackle. Played 327 snaps in only 4 years thus far, though, and has really never been that good, really struggling in pass protection. Emil Wagner, a former top 150 recruit, will contend with him. Pretty great offensive line they had last year. Should be good again this season, but the losses outside will be something to monitor and could cause them issues early on in the year, Nick. And, you got to think they're going to go play a tough, physical Mike Elko defense. Again, it was also, his former quarterback, Riley Leonard, under center with those 2 tackles gone. It's going to be a tough challenge to survive week 1. I think as the season goes on, things will start to kick in gear for this whole line. But early on, I might have some big concerns for how they might hold up.
This offensive line has to replace a lot of talent here. Obviously, we're serious what this is going to look like. Tosh Baker didn't play a whole lot, but he's a graduate senior, so he does have some experience in the program. Billy Schwaff at right guard is a guy they're going to move in there. I think he could be okay. Rocco Spindler could potentially win that battle as well. He's also trying to potentially be a left guard, but Pat Coogan, I think, has that lockdown. Coogan's a really solid player. Ashton Craig steps up at center, next man up mentality as they lose their center to the portal. I think Craig's a solid piece. And then Charles Jorgensen, he was a really solid high-level recruit who really saw the field last year, took some steps forward, and is looking to take another step forward this year. They really do build good offensive line players at Notre Dame. They're strong in the trenches. They always have been, so I have no doubt they'll be able to do so. I just worry about the depth a little bit this year. They lost a really talented player in Joe Alt, obviously a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. It's going to be tough to replace that sort of production and stability that you have given with a guy like that who's really, really solid. So it's going to be curious to see what that looks like this year for this team.
Looking at the offensive verdict for the Irish, they return only 3 starters, but they quietly have an impressive supporting cast of its young wide receiver and running back group matched with a veteran in Leonard, who has shown flashes to be a game changer at quarterback and really fits the mold of passers that have thrived under Denbrock. So I'm excited for his development. And, like you said, a line should be good, but once again need to monitor how the tackle position looks. What do you think the upside is here, Nick? Because I certainly think that we're a fan of Riley Leonard, but in terms of passing upside, right now it just seems very limited. Again, I think Denbrock's going to do some good work, and they're going to be able to execute his skills. Jesus Christ. I'm going to resume right here.
All right.
They're going to be able to use his skills properly, and I think that's going to lead to some good production. But in terms of upside, where do you rate him?
I think this is certainly a guy that you look at in the portal. A lot of people are saying this is one of the best quarterback portal ads. I think it's towards the middle of the pack. I think Riley Leonard is an incredible athlete, but he's coming off of a scary injury last year. He also wasn't having the best season passing last year. The stats early on, 3 picks, 3 touchdowns, about 1,000 yards passing through his first couple of games. Not phenomenal numbers. He's a really good running quarterback. I think Denbrock will be able to draw up something similar to what he did last year down at LSU. So I think there will be success on the ground for Leonard as a quarterback. I just worry about the passing. If they find themselves in a situation where he's got to throw the ball late in the game, there might be turnovers and costly mistakes against some of those tougher teams.
Now moving ahead to the Irish defense, one that was phenomenal last year. They added 3 guys in the portal, lost 8, returning 5 starters, and it starts with 2 elite defensive tackles. Howard Cross, a great one-gap penetrator with impressive lateral movements, nice bull rush, and overall underrated strength of 6'1", 288. Shows good effort and has plenty of range with nice balance and stunt abilities. Alongside him, Riley Mills, showcases good hand usage with placement and power. Has a variety of moves, has great hustle and pursuit. At 6'5", 295, he's a pretty good edge setter who can shed blocks and has acceleration when slicing through those gaps. These 2 players are phenomenal, Nick, and you throw in a Duke transfer in R.J. Oben, who's developed into a very sturdy pass rusher, 6'4", 255. Has good size and speed, needs to be better in pursuit versus the run. I certainly think they're going to coach him up to be a very special player this year. The rest of the defensive line, though, is pretty iffy. Jordan Bethelo played lots of snaps and was respectable. Josh Burnham was solid at times. Third-year player, junior Tala Kamaka, didn't play that much. Edge department pretty much in flux, I would say. The rest of the interior D-line, Gabriel Rubio at 6'5", 306. He was good for them. Jason Inouye at 6'5", 294. Saw a good amount of snaps, and I think Donovan Heinisch should make a good impact this year in the rotation. Following a pretty good debut season. Good D-line here. Pass rushing depth outside of Oben, though, is very iffy, Nick, and maybe you can say that about the interior as well, but I'm really concerned about what they're going to get off the edge.
R.J. Oben's a really great add off the edge. I think he's going to be a big home wrecker from Duke. A really nice add, big physical player. Like what he can do. Certainly is really solid at Howard Cross returns at nose tackle on the defensive line. A really strong physical player. Your top return tackle is 6'6" total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and 2 pass breakups. A big physical player, stuffs the run right there in the middle of the pack. I really like what they have there. Riley Mills is a really solid player as well. 47 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks for him. Decent numbers there that they return. I really do like what they have with that. Gabe Rubio, 11 total tackles last year for him. Nice returning production, potentially with him in rotational snaps. Joshua Burnham as well, 18 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 1 sack as well. He looks to be that other edge partner potentially. I like what they can do with him. I think he's a really solid piece that this team returns. I think he's a solid overall player for this team. Jordan Bethrow as well, 32 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. I'm not as concerned with the pass rush production. I think they have enough players to get in there. I think they'll be able to get and stop the run and get in the backfield and be able to get some sacks. They were really solid last year against the pass. They really did. The run was their weakest point, right? They're 28th in the nation, 119 yards per game given up on the ground. I think they'll find a way to improve that a little bit this year and be better against the run.
You look at the middle of their defense. They returned Jack Kaiser, a linebacker who is elite for them in all regards. Has been one of the nation's most efficient tacklers for many years now. He's always been a stout run defender, but has never saw more than 400 snaps in a season. Drake Bowen was a stout player in high school and it's his second year with the Irish, a player with good speed and strength. Might have some versatility to his game. They look to explore that. Jaden Osbury and Jalen Sneed will contend for the Rover hybrid role. Sneed, they hoping, can become a solid rotational pass rusher this season. Kingston Vlamu Asa, a high-level recruit in this year's class, figures to get on the field a great deal. Linebacker depth is very, very young all around outside of Kaiser, so these guys need to learn and do so at an advanced level. What do you think is going to happen here, Nick? Because again, Freeman, I'm very confident in his ability to coach everybody up. When you look at this depth chart, they're as young as it gets, probably one of the younger ones in the nation. There's going to be a lot of weight on this team's shoulders, and again, we'll take a look at the schedule and see. We don't need them to be phenomenal in the month of September by any means, but when it comes to playoff time, this linebacking core needs to be in sync.
A very young linebacking core, which is certainly the biggest concern for me with this defense this upcoming season. 62 total tackles for Kaiser, 1.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, plus a pick for him last year. He's a really good, versatile linebacker, solid leader for this young group, Jalen Sneed. I think he'll be exciting to watch this year. 14 total tackles for him, 1 sack, and 1 tackle for loss last year. Derek Bowen as well. He's a big physical player, 14 total tackles for him last year. He should rotate in and out. I think that's some solid depth there as well. I like what they do with this scheme. I think this scheme is very interesting to watch. a couple different multiple types of scheme. They have that rover position that is a fun, different rotational piece. You can move that player around and get them involved. The linebacker core does worry me. I think this is definitely the weakest part of this defense, as they lost a lot of talented players last year to graduation in the portal. Definitely a tough spot to be with a lot of young guys, but I trust the coaching to develop these guys as the season goes on.
You look at the back end of this defense, I think a part that's very impressive for them is what they have in the secondary. It starts with Benjamin Morrison at corner. A guy who's proven to be a smooth, fluid athlete. Loose hips, really stands out in man coverage, underrated speed, great ball skills, does a good job of his vision and zone and baiting the quarterback. Certainly lacks length and size and needs to get better versus the run. I'll start with his poor tackling abilities in one-on-one situations at 6'1", 186. You look at a guy at safety and Xavier Watts, an elite ball hawk who won some hardware last year, has aggressiveness and physicality as a former linebacker, shows good eyes and play recognition. Really needs to continue to learn to be disciplined of his overall aggression, though it will only get better. He's still relatively new to this position. Look at the rest of them. Jaden Mickey will likely be CB2 after garnering good experience last season and has the physicality to be a good run defender. Certainly needs to be better in coverage with discipline and not be as open versus double moves. Christian Gray was a highly impressive player as a true freshman, especially in coverage, and should have a defined role this year. Chance Tucker will provide depth, but hasn't been all that good this far in his career. Jordan Clark, pretty impressive ad from Arizona State, been a quality nickelback in his career. Should take another step forward with his staff at the helm. And then you're looking back at that safety group alongside Watts. Aiden Schuler was a 4-star from last year's class. Also held offers from Georgia and Alabama, so this is a guy that was highly coveted. Only played a few snaps, but saw plenty of first-time reps this spring. His Northwestern transfer, Rod Hurd, didn't practice as he was finishing up his degree. A player who was coming off a great season for the Wildcats as a run defender and in coverage. You also have second-year players Ben Minich and Luke Tolich, who is a quite interesting prospect who will fight for quality time in the rotation. This is a good secondary overall, Nick. A lot of people don't respect Notre Dame for a variety of different reasons. They have two guys right here in the secondary who are going to make a lot of money, I assume, one day. And Watts, again, he did win some hardware last year.
This is a unit that's a very strong unit, top 5 unit in the nation last year, 157.3 pass yards per game, given up good for 3rd in the nation, which is part of their trio of top 10 in the nation finishes in points per game as well as yards per game. Xavier Watts, an incredible ball hawking player that should get some more silverware this season. 52 total tackles for him, 3 tackles for loss, 7 interceptions, and 4 pass breakups. Really good player. Also forced a fumble and recovered a fumble for a touchdown. Benjamin Morrison as well, really good in coverage, 3 interceptions, 10 pass breakups for him, 31 total tackles. Not the best tackler, has to polish his tackling certainly this year. Christian Gay and Jaden Mickey add some nice depth at the bottom of the depth chart there. 11 tackles each for them. They each got a pick as well, with Mickey returning his for a pick 6. 2 pass breakups for each of them as well. I like the secondary. I think they return enough pieces here for me to be comfortable with it. They added some nice pieces from the portal as well that you alluded to, including Jordan Clark, who I think was a nice add, and Rod Hurd is a decent add as well. I like the secondary to be at the same level they were last year. A very strong unit and caps off a good defense.
Xavier Watts, a guy that won the Bronco Nagurski Award Trophy last year with 7 interceptions and 4 pass breakups, showcasing some pretty ridiculous ball skills and playmaking. The verdict for this defense, I think it's elite for the Irish. Obviously, the schedule isn't all that great and certainly leads them maybe stat padding a bit, but they played 2 elite offenses last year in Ohio State and USC, held them in check considerably, and they only give up only 350 yards twice all season long. Defensive line is phenomenal players, but depth and pass rush will need to show up, while youth at linebacker could maybe become a major issue. Secondary, on the other hand, is one of the nation's best. I have no real problems here with this Notre Dame defense. I think Marcus Freeman's got himself a great bunch on their hands. And even in the game they lost against Louisville, the defense only held them to 330 yards. So this is a unit that certainly showed up week in, week out. Moving to the final prediction for the Irish, Nick, this schedule has some insanity as they play only 3 true road games, with the second coming September 14th and the last one on November 30th, as they play 3 neutral site games in between that. This being great news, they lost 2 games last year, both of them on the road by 8 points or more. Irish have a great roster, should be in CFP contention. This offense, I would say, underperformed last year quite significantly in those big games. The return of Denbrock is going to do wonders for them. They shook off the unpleasant play from 2022, where, remember, every single week it was a close game. And year 3 could lead to some major opportunities as everything seems well aligned for Marcus Freeman. A lot to break down here with the Irish, Nick. Will 10 wins get them into the playoffs? Maybe not. You're going to go ahead and pick them to win 11, including that season opener against the Aggies, which would go ahead and put them in the CFP. I don't know what the schedule is about. I don't know how they pulled this off. I'm not sure how this was really even allowed, but this is ridiculous. The 3 road games they do play are incredibly difficult at the same time, though, Nick, so we definitely want to give them the respect there. Go ahead and explain your thoughts, because I know you're not exactly happy with what you see.
I don't like the schedule at all. I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet before I wax on for 30 minutes about why Notre Dame just needs to join a conference. They got to join a conference, right? This is just embarrassing when you look at it. They play 3 road games, and then that's just it. You have you're playing Navy, Army at neutral sites. You're playing the service academies at neutral sites. I know those are big games for the historical rivalries and big draws, but those are 2 games adding up on your schedule. You're playing Georgia Tech at a neutral site as well, a team that's really not going to do a whole lot. Then you look at you get Miami, Ohio, NIU, Louisville, Stanford, all at home. Teams that are just not going to be great. This Virginia, another easy home game. Sure, traveling to College Station is never easy, and that's going to be a very loud game. And we've seen Notre Dame lose these big games on the road in high pressure environments week 1 in the past. So certainly a game you want to keep an eye on. I think they're going to beat A&M. I'm a little colder on A&M than most people. I do think that Notre Dame will win that game. I think they're going to lose to Florida State when things are all said and done. I think they beat USC at the tail end of the season as well. Another tougher road game, but that's a team that a lot of people have some issues with. I don't like the schedule at all. I think this team's got to join a conference. I know they don't because of that NBC TV contract and all the headaches that come with that, but man, what a sweetheart deal that is for Notre Dame and their fans to pump out schedules like this. I just personally don't like it. I don't think it's great for the game. I know they're a historic name. I know they have all the pedigree, all the history, and all that. I just don't think it's great for the game in this new era conference realignment for them just to sit on the sidelines and play this schedule where they just really have a bunch of random games that don't add a whole lot of depth here. They dodge some of the bigger teams in the area. They don't play Michigan anymore. They don't play Ohio State this year. They don't play Clemson this year. So definitely this schedule is a weaker one. I think they should get in the playoffs pretty easily with this schedule. If Marcus Freeman doesn't get this team in the playoffs, and they're going to be asking a lot of questions at South Bend, they have a very nice offense and a really strong defense. I like the pros for the Fighting Irish this year. I think they will find their way in the playoff with the expanded format, and then you got a real shot there. If you host a playoff game in South Bend at that time of year, that place is going to be absolutely rocking. It's going to be a tough place to play, and then it's really just house money. You're playing with all the chips at that point, and Notre Dame could certainly go on a run.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, the schedule is pretty soft, but there is a couple games on here. There will be notable. It's not just a complete cakewalk. The 3 road games we alluded to, Miami of Ohio did win the conference last year. Will that be a tough game for them? Probably not. Louisville, that might be a notable game as well. And I think Georgia Tech, that's pretty much a home game for the Yellow Jackets. They're being played in Mercedes-Benz. I think that's another game you can circle. And, of course, the Seminoles traveling to South Bend. So there's plenty of games here that we'll be able to see them get fraud checked, I guess you could say, Nick, and I don't see that really happening with this team. 10-plus wins is pretty much a lock, I would say. I think this offense, even though they're a B-plus right now, can certainly work their way into a better grade by the end of the year. That's going to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me talking the Irish, a really good football team this season. It's going to be interesting to see how things play out, especially for the schedule that really is incredibly favorable.
As much as I don't like it, I think this team is a double-digit win team this year. I think Marcus Freeman is an incredible coach. I do think he is building something very strong up there in a traditional football powerhouse. I think this team will get 11 wins. Again, I may not like it, but I think that's just what the facts on the paper show me. This is a team that's got a schedule that's very manageable, a team that's got a really nice offense and a really strong defense, plus phenomenal coaching. This team should see themselves winning a lot of games this year.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.